Across centuries of art, one theme persists: the fascination with giving up. Not as failure, not even as tragedy, but in some way an aesthetic, a way of framing human exhaustion. There's something about resignation that seems to draw artists back again and again. Maybe it's because art thrives in vagueness, and resignation is inherently ambiguous. It's not death, but it brushes against it. We like to imagine surrender as dramatic, but most of the time it isn't like that. 100 small retreats, each one easier than the last, until you realize you've stepped back so far you don't even remember what you were reaching for. Even when you try to outrun it, resignation has a way of catching up. You can fill your days with work, with friends, with entertainment, with endless distractions, but the quiet always returns. That feeling of exhaustion, of being done, doesn't vanish just because you've found ways to occupy the hours. It lingers at the edges, slipping back in during pauses, during silence, during the moments you're left alone with yourself. No matter how much you pile on top of it, the sense of having already surrendered finds its way through. And that's why resignation fascinates us, because it's not clean. Giving up unsettles us precisely because it resists narrative. It doesn't resolve, and in that stopping, there's something both terrifying and strangely honest. When you strip away the noise of persistence, when you set aside the demand to endure, what's left is the bare truth of exhaustion, a truth most people recognize but rarely admit. And that's what makes it fascinating to study. Giving up becomes more than an action. It becomes a mood, a reoccurring atmosphere, a cultural language. Blur's No Distance Left to Run is resignation distilled into 3.5 minutes. Written in the shadow of Damon Albarn's breakup, it carries the weight of something already finished. The song resists the usual arc of a breakup ballad. There's no swell, no climb towards release. It flattens itself instead, moving steadily, almost stubbornly, towards stillness. The production leaves large amounts of open space, and Albarn's delivery is less of a performance than a statement, direct, stripped of embellishment. When he sings, "I hope you're with someone who makes you feel safe in your sleeping tonight," it isn't framed as bitter or forgiving. It's delivered like a line read from the end of a story, a conclusion that's already been written. What's interesting here is the absence of accusation. Breakup songs often thrive on anger, betrayal, or at least nostalgia. Albarn gives us none of that. Instead, he delivers the sound of someone who has run out of energy. The title says it plainly. There is no distance left to run. It's a deeply human-scale resignation. It doesn't universalize or expand into abstraction. It's one man, one love, one ending. Yet the intimacy of it, the sigh, the quiet blessing, makes it universal in its own way. Everyone knows what it's like to reach the point where fighting for something feels impossible. This also situates the song in an unusual place within the history of British music at the turn of the millennium, where many of Albarn's songs in the Britpop scene lean towards confidence and bravado. This track strips all of that away. There's no posture here. Instead, it almost feels anti-dramatic. It's that restraint that has allowed this song to endure, because rather than offering consolation or triumph, it embodies the quieter, more common reality of resignation, the recognition that sometimes nothing is left to be salvaged. Silent Hill 2 is one of the most direct explorations of the resignation in video games. On the surface, it looks like a survival horror title. You play as James Sunderland, a man who travels to the fog-shrouded town of Silent Hill after receiving a letter from his wife, Mary. The problem is that Mary has been dead for years.
Mary, could you really be in this town?
What begins as a search for answers becomes something else entirely. Silent Hill itself is not a normal place. The monsters, the distorted streets, even the people James meets are shaped by his own grief and guilt. The game makes it clear that James is not searching for Mary so much as comforting his inability to let her go. His journey is less about survival than about the weight of resignation. The town is filled with figures who reflect James' inner state. Angela, a woman haunted by years of abuse, wanders the town in search for her mother. Her resignation is clear. She has given up on ever escaping her trauma, and her final scene in a burning staircase makes her fate obvious. Eddie, bullied and humiliated his whole life, responds with violence and denial, lashing out as if to justify the contempt others showed him. Both of them are portraits of what happens when resignation consumes a person entirely. James is not separate from them. He is simply another broken figure, drifting through a town built out of despair.
No, you're not.
Do I look like your girlfriend?
No, my late wife.
Then there is Maria, a woman who looks exactly like Mary but behaves differently, flirtatious, playful, seductive. She represents James' longing for an easier version of Mary, one who makes fewer demands on him. Maria dies over and over throughout the game, only to reappear, as if James' desire and guilt are looping endlessly. Her presence is a reminder that James has already surrendered to fantasy, clinging to illusions because the truth is unbearable. The truth, of course, is that James killed Mary himself. Unable to handle her long illness and suffering, he suffocated her. The letter that brought him to Silent Hill was never real. The entire journey is built on denial, a way to avoid accepting what he has done. James has already given up before the game even begins. Silent Hill only forces him and the player to walk through the consequences of that resignation. The ending emphasized this in different ways. In the in-water ending, James drives into the lake and drowns, surrendering completely. In the Maria ending, he leaves town with Maria, choosing delusion over truth. A different form of resignation, living in denial rather than facing reality. Even the so-called leave ending, where James departs with Laura, a child connected to Mary, does not feel triumphant. It suggests survival but not healing. Silent Hill never offers redemption, only variations on how resignation can take shape. What makes the game unique is how it uses interactivity to make resignation something the player experiences. You are the one walking through empty streets, reading fragments of letters, watching James falter. You feel the weight of repetition, the futility of fighting monsters that never truly go away. Unlike a film or book, you aren't just observing James' resignation, you inhabit it. This is what makes Silent Hill 2 unforgettable. It avoids the traditional structure of horror games where victory means survival. Here, survival is meaningless. If it doesn't address the despair underneath, the true horror is not dying in Silent Hill, but realizing you have already given up on life before stepping foot in the town. More than 2 decades later, Silent Hill 2 is still remembered as one of gaming's most devastating narratives. The town reflects what is already inside James, and the player's journey is simply a process of uncovering that fact. In the end, there is no rescue, no catharsis. There's only the recognition that resignation has been there from the start, waiting to be admitted. Kenneth Longeren's Manchester by the Sea is not a story of redemption. It doesn't tell you that grief makes us stronger or that pain can be overcome. It gives us Lee Chandler, and Lee's life is defined not by what he has, but by what he has lost. From the first scenes we see him in, he is already a man emptied out. He works as a janitor in Quincy. He fixes pipes, shovels snow, and takes out the trash. He eats alone, drinks alone, fights when provoked, and spends the rest of his time locked inside a one-room apartment. Nothing about him suggests he is waiting for something better. He has settled into routine, into silence, into a life stripped down to the bare minimum. At first, the film doesn't tell us why. We only see the effect. A man who doesn't laugh, a man who avoids conversation, a man who moves through life like it isn't really his. And then, slowly, the truth comes out. Years earlier, Lee started a fire in his own house. A mistake so simple it barely feels real. He forgot to close the screen on the fireplace, went out for some beer, and by the time he came back, the house was gone. His 3 children were dead. The fire didn't just destroy them, it destroyed his marriage, it destroyed any possibility of forgiving himself, and it destroyed him. The movie reveals this in the middle, not at the beginning, and that timing matters. But after the reveal, we understand he isn't detached, he's devastated, he's resigned. The man we've been following is someone who already gave up years ago and never returned. After the incident, there was nothing left for him. His wife left him, his neighbors pitied him. He even tried to take his own life, only to be stopped. From then on, he carried his grief as something permanent. He did not move on. He did not rebuild. He simply continued, not living, not healing, just existing. Then his brother dies, and Lee is pulled back to Manchester to handle the arrangements. He's left in charge of his nephew, Patrick. For a while, it looks like this might be a turning point. The audience is trained to expect redemption here, that this new responsibility will force him to open up, that love for his nephew will give him purpose. It's the shape of a story we've seen countless times before, but Manchester by the Sea refuses that. Lee can't do it. He tries. He looks after Patrick, handles the detail, makes an effort. But when the idea of becoming Patrick's permanent guardian comes up, he refuses. He says the one thing most films won't allow their protagonists to say. He says that he is not capable, that the past is too heavy, that he cannot start again in the place where his life ended. And then comes the line, the one that carries the entire weight of the movie, the one that lands with more force than any breakdown, any dramatic explosion, any speech about hope could ever have.
I can't beat it. I'm sorry.